Hello, this is going to be a review of the DECKTECTIVE series. The DECKTECTIVE series is a series of investigation games which start off with you constructing 3D crime scenes, and the rest of the game you'll be trying to figure out what happened. These games are very reliant on a mix of visual clues as well as text-based clues, so I think they're quite well suited to different types of players. In my own case, I've noticed I'm a little bit weaker when it comes to putting together certain combinations of visual clues. So in my experiences with these games, when we got to the end, I received some nice surprises when I found the solutions to the game were a little bit different in certain aspects than I had expected. According to the manufacturer, you can expect about 1 hour of gameplay for each of these games. I feel like that is based on the one-player version of the game. In my experience, these games are usually lasting me about 75 minutes, sometimes over 90 minutes. For each of the games in this series, I played with a partner. Over the course of 7 games, I had 3 different partners for these games, and one partner in particular really enjoyed this series, and she's played quite a lot of games within the mystery genre, and she said that these are her favorites. Later in this video, I'll give you more information on how the one-player mode and two-player mode differs. But first, I'd like to go through each of the games and give you my thoughts on their strong points and weak points. And then after that, I'm gonna go over which ones I think are the most suited to beginners, younger players, adults, and so on. And to spice things up a bit, one of the games that will be reviewed, I'm gonna record it on a different day. There will be some different visual and verbal hints that you might be able to pick up on. There really aren't any spoilers in this video in that I am showing you the crime scenes, but these are things that you're going to see right at the beginning of the game. I'm not going to be giving away any of the plot twists that you will experience during these games. Like most of the games in this investigation genre, you can only really play them once yourself, but things are not damaged or destroyed, so you could always pass them along, trade them, or do what you want with them. The first game in the series was Blood Red Roses. It's a game set in the early 1800s at a Tudor mansion. The owner of the mansion is found dead outside of the mansion. You can see him there just by the front door. There's a little spot of blood. There's a horse and carriage. Someone's just arrived to visit. There's a dog guarding the bridge. And there are also hints to be found on the back of some of these cards as well. Blood Red Roses is really quite a simple version of what the DECKTECTIVE series is all about. In this game, you'll go through and you'll be studying evidence related to the scene. There'll be some testimonies provided by the people that are there on the scene. And at the end of the case, you're going to try to decide who is the killer, how did they do it, and so on. As I said, it is a simple version, so it is a little bit shorter than most of the other cases. This case is 52 cards long, making it the shortest of all the games in this set, the longest game in the set being 62 cards long. From seeing other reviews of this game, a lot of people said that the game was very easy to solve. There are also a lot of people who have commented that part of this game was almost impossible to solve. What's going on with that big difference? I think for most people, when they look at solving the game in their mind, the main thing is, do they know who done it? And coming to the conclusion of who done it here is not so difficult. What I think some people had trouble with in this game is the how done it aspect. It does take a little bit of creativity to come up with the methodology to commit this crime, but it's all there in front of you in the game. I don't think the game's cheating. It's just that the creators of this game have tended to go with a more exciting, more unusual, more creative solutions than you might find in other mystery games. I think this aspect of the game would certainly appeal a lot to younger players. Although this game is based on deductive logic, the cases themselves tend not to be so realistic. They tend to have a little bit of creative license involved. So I think you need to go into each game knowing that These are just fun games. You have to be willing to embrace that in a few of the different cases in this series and realize these games are meant for fun. These are not based on real life cases. Due to the length of the game, the characters involved are not very well developed. That's a bit of a theme for some of the games in this series, but that's one thing that stood out in this case here, just due to the brevity of the case. To sum it all up, this isn't one of my favorite cases in the series. I think there are better ones. The next game in the series was released in 2020, The Gaze of the Ghost. Although this story is set in 2015, because it takes place in a dilapidated museum, it does come across as being set a little bit further back in time. Just like Blood Red Roses, you'll start off with an introduction and you'll be arriving at this museum. There's going to be a lot of interesting stuff happening throughout this game. Of all the detective cases, this has some of the most exciting and dramatic plot twists. There's really everything you can think of kind of ends up happening in this game. I really enjoyed the experience. Now, I'm quite surprised to say this, but on Board Game Geek, this is actually the lowest rated of all of the games in the Detective series, even though it's amongst my favorites. So I'm really curious to know if you've played a few of these games and you're anti Gaze of the Ghost or you're a fan of it. Let me know what you think. What really stood out for me was just how engaging the narrative is here. With each plot twist, just the excitement builds. These games are recommended for people of the age of 12 and up. If there are younger kids, early teens in your group, I think this is a really fun one to start with. I would also recommend this one for Halloween parties. With all of these games, the designers do recommend that you play them in a quiet place that's well lit. I would actually go against that with this game. I think it would actually be good to just play some creepy music in the background. I haven't really told you much about the plot. In this story, you arrive to investigate a disappearance of one of the staff members of this museum, and there's a terrified man who's the one who's made the phone call, and you're getting a tour of the museum from him. And this man is very afraid of the paranormal. So part of the investigation here involves the ghost of Macbeth. This is the ghost of Macbeth. It's a portrait at the museum. One criticism I would have of this game is when you get to the end of the case, there are 5 questions, as there are in each of these games. You don't know what the questions are going to be until you arrive at the very end of the game. One of the questions is very much a throwaway in relation to this picture. I feel like they should have gone with something else that would have been a bit more of an investigative task than this. It felt like it cheapened the scoring system a little bit. As in Blood Red Roses, Gaze of the Ghost does have some enjoyable visual trickery. Hopefully someone in your group will be clever enough to spot what is really going on in this scenario. In 2021, Nightmare in the Mirror was released. So Nightmare in the Mirror is referring to the scenario that confronts you at the beginning of the game. The unique thing about this is you are actually not on the crime scene itself during this game. It starts off, you've received a phone call and someone has received a set of pictures. I'll take out the card so you can see for yourself. So this woman, she has a smartphone in her hand. She's taken a picture. She's bound and gagged. She's seated across from a mirror. That's why this game is called Nightmare in the Mirror. We can see her here. Although this crime scene only has 3 cards with very little evidence, there's nothing on the back side of the cards just because we don't know where she is located. Over the course of the game, there will be additional information provided to you about this case. So it's essentially trying to solve a kidnapping case. What is going on? This game is on the shorter side of things. It has 55 cards. It's quite a simple case, but it's very enjoyable. The plot twists keep you very engaged in the story. And I thought overall, most of the case is quite easy to solve. There was, however, one area of the case where the game was able to fool me and my partner. Like Gaze of the Ghost, I think this would be a very good game to play with some younger players in your group. More experienced players may find that it's a bit simple. However, I do think the story itself is very engaging, so you shouldn't just pass it over just because the bulk of the case is not that difficult to solve. Fourth game in the series was also released in 2021. It is The Will Without an Heir. This game involves the death of the gentleman you see pictured in this game, and you can see him there. He's dead at his desk. This is an interesting crime scene. You get a shot of the hill. There's a lot of things going on in the background. Let's see if you can see beside the window there's a mark on the wall, a handprint mark. You might notice there's a few footprints leading from the window. You'll also be able to pick out that there are some footprints near this window. You get a view from behind. You can see from this angle that there's a ship in the background. And this story does involve the shipping trade. The game is set in 1698, and the victim was a powerful Dutch merchant who had contracts with the East India Shipping Company, the most powerful corporation on the globe at the time. For me, this case did not play to the strengths of this format. What I really like about the detective format is the way you get a closer look at the different pieces of evidence, which perhaps sheds them in a different light. And you're not really given that in this game. At no stage is there a comparison of the footprints to the footwear of the people at the scene of the crime. There are no measurements provided of the size of each people's feet and shoe size and so on. We also don't get any extra information about this handprint that I showed you a moment ago. So what we're left with in this case, rather than getting a lot of information about the evidence, we get a lot of information from the people at the scene of the crime. It's a bit of he said, she said. The reason this isn't the best format for this kind of story is that you can only get so much information on a card. If you wanted to do a cold case style game or a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective style game, you can have lots and lots of information. You could have a page of interviews or pages of interviews to go through, and you can really get a sense of the characters. I don't feel like you really get a strong sense of character in this game, so instead you're kind of left with trying to pass the details of the different testimonies and trying to come up with theories. I did find this to be one of the more challenging cases. At the end of the game, there are 5 questions. I was able to identify the killer. I was able to identify how they were able to commit the murder. However, I wasn't able to get some of the other questions, things like motive. I didn't work out who had taken the necklace that was missing from the victim's safe. The safe is there. You can see under the picture of the grandmother. And I wasn't able to identify where the necklace was hidden. One aspect that also led to a little bit of disappointment with me in this game was a heightened sense of expectation when we got to the very final question. When I read out the options to my friend, he said, okay, it's got to be this one. I won't tell you which one. And I said, well, why do you think that? And he said, well, from a game design perspective, if they've managed to do that in this game, that is going to be a spectacular finale. That was the one I went with. And when I turned the card, I was a little bit disappointed with the final solution. It wasn't a particularly interesting final solution. I didn't get it right, but there are other cases in these detective series where I've missed questions in the games and I've been like, oh, wow, they really tricked me here. This one was just like, oh, okay, that's it. That's what they did. I think it was the intention of the game designers here to make this one a little bit more challenging. I could think of a few ways you could have provided additional hints subtly and less subtly to get the players to jump to the correct conclusion. But obviously they wanted this game to be as tricky as it ended up being. Personally, this was my least favorite case of the game. I didn't enjoy playing this one as much as any of the others. One aspect that I really liked in this game is that the game was willing to take a few little twists that a lot of investigation games don't do. in that in this case you have the housekeeper making accusations that the doctor of the victim is a charlatan. So you've got this little bit of doubt created in the doctor's story. Typically in an investigation game, whatever you see in a doctor's testimony, a doctor's autopsy findings, they're kind of taken as concrete. If the doctor says death occurred within the last 2 to 3 hours, you have a very clear window of time for which you are going to use to eliminate your suspects or prove them innocent if they have an alibi. So I like this aspect of the case where if this doctor is a charlatan, what does that mean? Does that mean that he's also the killer? How should we treat his other findings? It really intrigues me to play games where the press, doctors, and police aren't treated as infallible witnesses or purveyors of the truth. 2022 saw the release of a game called You Can't Cheat Death. So this is a very unique setup to the case. You arrive at a high-stakes casino game and you find that everybody in the room is dead. What went on? Why are all these high-profile gangsters dead? Why is the mayor acting as the dealer? Why is he also dead? One of the unique things about this particular case is, as everybody at the crime scene is dead, there are no actual witness statements to go through. You're going to go through the criminal files of each people and some recent newspaper headlines. And there's some other things that I won't tell you about because they are some of the game's plot twists. But because it's not relying on any witness testimonies, I think it enhances the game, as actually the witness testimony format for a game like Detective is not particularly strong, as all of the information has to fit on 1 or 2 cards. There aren't particularly lengthy witness testimonies in these Detective games. If you are interested in games with more interesting styles of witness testimonies, I'd recommend looking at something like La La Land, which is a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective style book. Another good game which has some interesting use of witness testimonies in Suspects. Good thing about the Suspects game is there are some hints given during the conversations with witnesses. Not only can you choose which questions to put to the different suspects, you can also sense where they might be lying from the way the conversations are reported within the game. If somebody goes silent for a moment after saying something, it'll give you a hint that you might need to probe. What could it have been that this person had on their mind? You Can't Cheat Death takes place over 60 cards. There is quite a lot of information about the different people within the game. As you can see from the picture on the bottom of the box, there's quite a lot for you to explore on this crime scene. Lots of different ways you can approach the case to try and work out why these people ended up dead. This case is set in Las Vegas during the 1950s, at a time when gang influence on the casino scene was much greater than it is now. Once again, when I got to the end of this game, I did find that there was one major surprise that the game had managed to hide from me. I think that's one of the reasons the woman I was playing this one with really rates this series so highly. She just enjoyed that engaging narrative that takes place throughout the game, and then the surprise twist. It feels more like experiencing a great mystery TV series that gets you right at the last second after hooking you for hours on end. Secrets in the Sand was released in 2023, and it takes place on an archaeological dig site. This is the entrance to the dig site, and you can see that there's a body lying there, and there's something buried in the ground that has been uncovered. There are different things going on throughout the room. I will remove this card just so you can get a better look of this crime scene. And you might notice that instead of the game taking place inside the box with the card inserted inside, you actually have the game taking place on top of the box. There is more content in Secrets of the Sand than any of the other games in this series. It has 62 cards. It's the same as Gaze of the Ghost, but I think this game is a little bit more oriented to a more adult audience. I think there's still a lot here that kids would enjoy, but certain aspects of the storyline I think are going to be more interesting for adults. So this game does start with a long introduction. We get this woman who's shown up at the police station, and she is reporting that her dig site has been attacked by grave robbers. One of the most wonderful aspects of the game is the addition of some new mechanics which gave you some choices of how to investigate. This really made for some fun moments of anticipation. If they do make more games, I really hope they continue in this direction of adding this choice element. It really does make the game a little bit more exciting during the mid phase of the game. One of the aspects that made the game a lot stronger than other games in this series when it comes to character development is the game relies on things like diary entries, letters, which give you a much better sense of the types of characters rather than just relying on witness testimonies as some of the other games in this series do. As of the time of recording, this appears to be the final game in the Detective series. It's called Lock Up Sherlock Holmes. And in this game, Sherlock Holmes appears to have been a very bad boy. He appears to have committed a crime, stealing from the palace of the Queen of England. Which palace? Buckingham Palace, of course. This is Sherlock Holmes' office at Baker Street. You'll notice there's a message to Moriarty in paint on the floor. There are certain things that have happened. Maybe it's a little bit clearer from this angle. There's a broken window on one side. There's a broken violin on the floor. What is going on with Sherlock Holmes? That's what you're investigating in this game. This game takes place over 59 cards. One of the unique points of this game is that there's essentially two mysteries going on. What is the mystery involving the crime that Sherlock is accused of committing, and what is going on with his Baker Street office? The most engaging aspect of the game, I think, was the choice aspect, which is similar to what you can experience in Secrets of the Sand. I didn't think this mystery was as interesting overall as most of the other cases. One of the things I really did like was this is the only game which incorporates some secret messages and secret codes, and the game did a very good job in priming you to be ready to crack this code. It kind of gives you two cracks at the egg in the sense that it gives you a message that if you really worked hard on it and just tried to crack it by brute force, you probably would be able to do so as long as you made some breakthrough along the way. As you play on through the game, even if you're unable to crack the code from the original message itself, you'll soon realize from another card how you can crack this code. This is the only type of code breaking that goes on in these games. I think it's quite an interesting aspect and done very well within this game. Overall, I did find this less engaging than some of the stronger cases, some of the more enjoyable cases in the series. And I think that's mainly due to the amount of witness testimony that takes place in the game. The games I would recommend for younger players, beginner players, would be Nightmare in the Mirror and Gaze of the Ghost. I think that Nightmare in the Mirror is a little easier than Gaze of the Ghost. Both games are very engaging, and I'm sure if you played this with your family, you'll have a good time. For adults, I would recommend Secrets in the Sand. It is still a game that you could play with your children. Please bear in mind that every game in this series has some kind of report of violence or threats of violence. There are murders within this series. If you really are concerned about that kind of content, these games are not going to be for you. For adults, Secrets of the Sand is an excellent game. It has some interesting themes. I love the setting. If you're really interested in being able to make choices in these games and not just turn the card and go to the next card and follow, the same path that everyone else will, I would like to recommend Secrets of the Sand and Lock Up Sherlock Holmes. Personally, of these two, Secrets of the Sand I enjoyed a lot more. Now let's talk a little bit more about how the game actually works. Each of these games follows a narrative structure in that as you'll be playing the game, there will be some plot twists and things can change. People can arrive at the scene. Unexpected things can happen at the scene. Sometimes the crime scene itself is changed. You'll be given a card and told to insert it into the scene, and you won't be able to look at the card that was there earlier, so you may have to go from your memory to work out what it is that has actually just happened. There are some very minor spoilers here to one of the games. I'm going to show you two of the cards that you may receive in the game. You'll notice in the top corner we have a large 1, and in the top corner here we have a large 2. What are these numbers referring to? In this game, you have what's called an archive. You'll start with one card in the archive. It's just a card that has some instructions on it. And if you have one card in the archive, that means you can place a card which has the number 1 in the corner in public view, basically sharing it with your partner. Or if you're playing this on your own, it means it's going to stay there for the rest of the game. If you choose to throw this card into the archive, you'll then have 2 cards in the archive. The more cards you have in the archive, the higher the number of cards you can display. So for example, in this example, we have 2 cards in the archive. Now that I've thrown this one away, that means I could add a card that is worth 2 points or a card that is worth 1 point to public display. In each of these games, you're going to end up with 10 cards in the archive by the end. What happened with me at first, as I played the first few games, I tended to be a little bit slower in adding cards to the archive. As I played more games, I tended to throw a lot of cards into the archive early on, and I really wouldn't have to throw away many cards after that, as once I had enough, I could just show my partner the cards I had in my hand. What are the issues with this? Here is an example. If you look at this card, you'll see there is quite a lot of text. If you throw away a card, it's very unlikely that you're going to remember everything that was on that card. It's a bit different to the Sherlock Files in this regard, in that the Sherlock Files cards tend to be much shorter. They have less information. So a lot of the time you'll be looking at a card and saying, I'm confident I can remember this, so I'm going to throw it away. The experience I've had in playing these games is very rarely were my partners able to give me useful information from the cards that they had thrown away. Often they had no memory of what was on the cards because they were engaged in the storyline, and if they didn't think it was that important, it would just disappear from their mind. In a couple of cases, some cards that were thrown away were quite significant. Because of this, I would say if you're not so confident in your ability at solving these cases, I would recommend using the one-player mode with your group. I think at its heart, this system of having to throw away cards is essentially trying to solve a communication issue that can be a problem, and it can stop you enjoying these games. And that issue is this: what if you have one person on your team who kind of hogs the floor? They tell you that they've solved the case before you've really had the time to think it through. They might force their opinions on you. They may be a very clever person who does actually solve the case, or they may be an infuriating person who's just jumping to conclusions. I think what they're aiming to achieve is they're trying to force those types of personalities, people that want to rush to the finish, they're trying to force those people to listen to others. I just think it's done less effectively in Decketective than it is in the Sherlock Files. What I would recommend, if you get to the end of the game and you find that any of the questions seem like you're not able to answer them with confidence, I would recommend taking the cards that were thrown away and looking at them again, sharing them with your partner, and then trying to answer the questions again. Perhaps you could give yourself half a point or 50% of the points for that particular question. One final comparison I'd like to make between Detective and the Sherlock Files games is that a great thing about the Sherlock Files games is that the difficulty basically adapts itself to the player or the players. What I mean by that is in the Sherlock Files, you can throw away a lot of cards in order to try and boost your score. So if you're feeling very confident that you know what is going on in the case, you could throw away most of the cards you have, and that would help you get a higher score at the end of the game. If you are feeling like you lacked confidence in understanding what was going on, you would simply throw away fewer cards, and in that sense, the game itself unfolds in a way where it kind of acts as its own hint system. Detective's system doesn't function like that, as you have this strict rule that the number on the corner of each card has to be the same or lower than the number of cards in the archive, whether you are a confident player or someone who has no idea what is going on. You're still going to be throwing away cards. In most investigation games, there is some sort of hint system that will help get you on track or help point you in the right direction. You don't get anything like that in Detective. So at the end of the game, if you select the wrong choices, you'll turn the card and you'll realize your choice is wrong, and you will see what the correct answer is. That can be a little bit frustrating, as these games are essentially one-time play for each player. You can't really play them again because once you're done, you're done. One workaround if you're in a group would be to make your choices, then spread the cards around each group and have one person go first, see if they have the correct answer. If they don't have the correct answer, that person could inform the group, and then the group could try to work amongst themselves to see if they solve it. Of course, one member of the group wouldn't be able to participate, as he would know the answer at this stage. I think it would be nice if the Detective company on their website had some hints that would help address some of the questions people might have when playing the game. Perhaps you could have some sort of a system where if you do go to the hints, maybe you lose 75% of the point for that question. But on the bright side, that means as long as you have the full deck of cards, you're always going to be able to play this game in the future. You don't have to worry about what the world is going to be like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years time, whether these games are still going to have functioning websites or not. Each game comes with a set of magnetic clips. When you get to the answer phase of the game, you pop on the clip to indicate your answer, and when you flip the card, you can see quite quickly whether you are correct or not. It's not as effective as web answering systems in that if you answer a question online, you can get the feedback that your answer is wrong and then go back and start again. You can't really do that in Detective because once you flip that card, you're probably going to notice which one was correct. If, like me, you've played all of the Detective games, you might be looking for some other games that you might enjoy. If you like the game's mechanic of having to remember some information and not being able to share certain information with your partners until the end of the game, the Sherlock Files series is a good one for you. On an individual case-by-case level, I'd probably say Detective is better just because you've got these lovely crime scenes to interact with. You've got structured plot twists. Sherlock Files is a little bit more of a communication-based game in that you're retaining a lot of information and sharing it with people at the end. It's quite fun to get to the end of the period where you're using the cards and then you have no more cards left in your hand and you can finally discuss your theories, your full theories, with no restrictions with your partner. You get 3 cases in each Sherlock Files set, so if one case isn't to your liking, you'll probably still be satisfied once you've played the others. If you are interested in a game which has a lot of visual information along with some text similar to Detective, perspectives may be to your liking. In this game, you're sharing information from cards with a partner and trying to work together. It can only be played with a group. It could be a group of 2, could be a group of 6. You can't play it solo. Finally, if you're interested in a game where you're going to be doing purely visual deduction, look at the Micro Macro Crime City series. In these games, there are a lot of different crime cases spread over a very large map. It'll cover most tables. You get a lot of cases in each set, so they are actually quite pricey, a bit pricier than your typical investigation game, but you do get more playing time out of it. The cases will be very appealing if you have younger children. Just be aware that there are some cases involving murders. There are cases involving drugs in here. There is a version made for kids, which is going to be released soon. It'll probably be out by the time I've uploaded this video. And in that one, there's no murders, no drugs, just things like bad behavior, vandalism, and stealing Christmas trees, that kind of thing. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have played any of the games in this Detective series, I'm really interested in knowing which ones you like. Next video, I think I'm gonna take a look at some mafia-themed mystery games.